It's individual choice, but you've been warned because it says not for human consumption.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Guru Nanda, be the guru of your own wellness. And I'm going to be touching a very important topic today. It's about seed oils. It's very hot with RFK Jr. coming to United States administration. It has become even hotter. And today we have Corey Nelson, the young entrepreneur. He has actually decided to put his life behind this project, and he has formed a thing called Seed Oil Free Alliance. So let us welcome Corey. Corey, thank you for coming in today to our podcast. And today we will be uncovering the secrets of ancient healing, modern health trends, and how to live your life best naturally. How the seed oils have literally become a part of this fast food culture, which is leading to major problems like inflammation, gut issues, obesity, and even chronic diseases. So let us unpack the truth. Corey Nelson has founded this amazing Seed Oil Free Alliance. He is on a mission to expose the dangers of seed oils and help people reclaim their health. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you, Dr. Puneet. It's such an honor to be here. Really appreciate that introduction. So our company, the Seed Oil Free Alliance, we offer a food certification, for example, with packaged foods, also with restaurants. Consumers can look for our green droplet seal that says Seed Oil Free Certified. It means that products have been audited and lab tested to ensure that they're truly free of seed oils. So the thing that I love, what you said about be your own guru, we want people to be able to make their own decisions, informed decisions based on accurate information, transparency, and consumer choice.
Beautiful. So first of all, for people who don't know anything about this, what is a seed oil?
Sure.
Simple question.
Very broad category. It's not a new term. The term's been used for at least 100 years. You can go to Google Books, type in seed oil before 1920. It's an industry term that recently came into common usage with consumers. Now, when we say seed oil, there could be 20, 30, 40 different oils around the world that would fit the definition of an edible oil extracted from the seed of plants. But here in the US and in most industrialized countries, there are really only a handful of seed oils that are very common and have dramatically increased in terms of average consumption during the 20th century. So here's a list of 9 seed oils that people will be able to find on a lot of food packaging. Soybean oil is the most common seed oil in the US. Corn oil is the second most common. Canola oil is the third most common. These other 6 seed oils are quite common, but nowhere near as common as those 3. So we're talking about sunflower oil, peanut oil, grapeseed oil, safflower oil, rice bran oil, and cottonseed oil.
So tell me one thing. I grew up in India and I grew up eating ghee. Ghee is like butter that is clarified, and it is in Ayurveda supposed to be the most healthiest form of any oil. It actually increases kapha, which means it increases earth in you. It increases stability in you. And of course, it has to be in moderation, everything in moderation, including moderation. But also I grew up eating coconut oil, mustard oil, and sesame seed oil, more for massage actually, not really for eating, but more for massage and oil pulling. So these were the oils that I grew up personally with. What do you think is the difference between these versus the ones that Safola and canola and whatever else you just said? What is the difference?
Let's temporarily set mustard and sesame aside because I do have some things to say about those. Those are seed oils with a traditional history of use and some important differences from modern, very common seed oils. Now, coconut oil and ghee are both low in omega-6 fats, and they're more stable when heated compared to seed oils. So very interesting that you said there's an association there with stability, whereas seed oils, generally speaking...
So explain it once again.
Sure.
Sorry. Explain it a little slowly.
Sure.
Omega-6, why is it so important? Why did you connect this to stability? Give us a little bit more detail.
Sure. So omega-6 fats are a type of fatty acid called a polyunsaturated fat. So fats are composed of a carbon backbone or carbon chain. The length of that chain and the type of molecular bond that exists there dictates what the fat's properties are in the body. So with polyunsaturated fats, there are 2 or more double bonds between carbons. This makes them more fragile. Now, omega-6 fats and omega-3 fats, people have probably heard those terms before. it may be kind of unclear what we're talking about, but you probably heard those terms. Omega refers to the final position of the double bond, the length from the end of the carbon chain. So omega-3 means that the final double bond is 3 carbons away from the end of the chain. Omega-6 means that it's 6 carbons away from the end of the chain. Now, both of these omega-6s and omega-3s play important roles in the body and in the diet because our bodies cannot make linoleic acid and other omega-6 fats, and they can't make alpha-linolenic acid or EPA or DHA, which are the important omega-3s. This is important because as human beings, we will develop a deficiency if we don't get some amount of omega-6 and omega-3 fats through our diet. Throughout history, people have always eaten a variety of foods that were available to them locally and generally have been able to maintain a balanced ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats.
What is the ideal ratio? And a lot of people have been demonizing omegas lately, and omega-3 is the one everybody talks about, but they demonize omega-6. Even in chicken, they say if you eat too much chicken, it's got a lot of omega-6.
It's demonizing, I would say, is due to oversimplification. I think it's, people's sometimes attention spans or, lack of desire to go deep into a topic can lead to black and white thinking about it. It is important that we get some amount of omega-6, some amount of omega-3. So there's the ratio. Historically, scientists think that 1-to-1 ratio, maybe up to about 4-to-1 ratio in the diet, meaning about 4 times the quantity or amount of omega-6 relative to omega-3. The estimate today is that modern diets probably contain closer to 15-to-1 or 20-to-1.
So 15 times more omega-6 versus it should be 1:4, which is 4 times of omega-3 should be omega-6.
Sure, and that's kind of...
That is why probably they are supplementing with omega-3 so that they can probably get a balance of the ratio. Is that what it is?
I think that's the thinking behind it. There's some benefit to that. The other thing that's really important, though, is on the one hand, we have the ratio, and then on the other hand, we have kind of the absolute amount that someone is eating. So ratios, omega-6 to omega-3, absolute amount would be what percentage of calories do we need from each one, and what's normal, what's high. We need about 1% to 2% of our overall calories from omega-6, which are fairly easy to obtain through animal products, natural sources of nuts, grains, whole foods, the chicken that you mentioned, eggs. All of these have enough omega-6 to prevent a deficiency, but seed oils are very, very high, very concentrated in omega-6. So people today, most of them are getting over 10% of their daily calories from omega-6, but actually getting, here in the US, getting more like 20 to 30% of their daily calories from seed oils without elevating the omega-3 intake commensurately. Another question that's raised, though, is the ratio the most important thing, or does the absolute intake also matter? So there's some unanswered questions here, and I think that when we go back to the idea of making your own decision or being your own guru, sometimes you don't have all the answers. You have to make a decision based on, what principles apply here, how comfortable am I with the status quo of the average American getting 20 to 30% of their daily calories. That's not moderation. That's sort of a historical anomaly.
Extreme.
Yeah.
So now I'm starting to get it. It's almost like if you're eating too much seed oils, you're supplementing your body with omega-6 in a way, versus ideally, so you're actually making things worse. Instead of 1:4, now you're 1:16 just because you're supplementing yourself with seed oils. What is the negative connotation in when you compare a ghee or let's say avocado oil? I think avocado oil is supposed to be a good oil, right? What is the difference in terms of chronic inflammation or oxidative stress or metabolic disorders that they talk about, or longevity that they talk about? What causes that?
It's helpful to go back, like you did, to the comparison between coconut oil or ghee compared to seed oils. So other than being high in omega-6 fats, which we'll get into that evidence in a moment, the polyunsaturated fats, keep in mind they have those 2 or more double bonds. Those bonds are more fragile. So when you say oxidative stress, these polyunsaturated fats are incorporated into cell membranes. Really, as much of them as you eat, they will be incorporated into cell membranes at a rate that matches your intake. So people that already have certain disease states or conditions that are associated with oxidative stress, there may be a worsening of those disease states or conditions. It's really important to note that a lot of oils that people are eating, they're heating before they eat the oil. So what happens with polyunsaturated fats, unlike coconut oil and ghee, what happens is that those polyunsaturated fats break down into harmful byproducts at a much higher rate, such as aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and polymer-like compounds. So you're getting these essentially non-food compounds introduced into your food when you cook on the stove at a high heat with a seed oil, which would not happen at the same rate with coconut oil or ghee. I know you wanted to get into specific evidence, so we could do that, but I think it's really helpful for people to understand what's just happening on the molecular level, even before you eat the seed oil.
I see these big drums of canola oil sitting in these retail stores, and I'm looking at these restaurant guys picking up 6 of those big drums of liquid, yellow liquid kind of looking canola oil. And then when I go to restaurants, I'm a little worried now eating food outside, because once I went in the kitchen of a restaurant owner, he's a friend of mine, and I saw the guy like literally dousing the whole thing, the fry pan, with canola oil. How carcinogenic are they? What could worse happen?
Well, so, the way that they're made, because you mentioned the processing, it's with oils like canola oil or soybean oil, they have to be highly processed to be edible. So what happens in that processing is any nutritional value that you would get from a whole food or a minimally processed oil like extra virgin olive oil, any other food that you could be eating is going to have more nutritional value. So kind of similar in a way to refined sugar. It's not that, eating an apple with a moderate amount of plant-based fructose and sugars in it is fine. It's a balanced food that has some sugar in it. But when you pull sugar out of, you pull out corn syrup, or you pull out beet or cane sugar and refine it, a similar thing is happening with seed oils. So it's just such a concentrated source of these omega-6 fats with really no other nutritional value. So that's one concern. People are getting, here in the US, I think about 20% of their calories from restaurants, over 60% from ultra-processed foods. So when you look at this, it is seed oils are one part of a bigger issue. I think that cost and convenience for busy people that work a lot, they may feel like they don't have another choice other than to eat these foods. There is a shift in restaurants. I have Google alerts set up for seed oil free restaurants, and many smaller restaurants can do this on their own. They get excited. Maybe the owner is avoiding seed oils. They say, I want to do this at my restaurant. So they'll make an announcement. So what I tell people now is, for the most part, if a restaurant is seed oil free, they will tell you. They will make sure that you know. You barely need to ask. It's not really the norm yet. What you could do if you have to eat at a restaurant is you can choose the foods that you eat according to the foods that would either have the lowest amounts of seed oils or none. So any grilled meat or vegetable, you could even request that no oil be added. It also depends on the individual's comfort level with making special requests at restaurants.
Why did they even start using these oils? 100 years ago, what did they use?
Well, before 100 years ago, it was a lot of animal-based oils, so plenty of butter and lard here in the U.S., and like you said, ghee and other animal fats around the world. It's really about cost. It's cheaper to make these seed oils using industrial processes. You grow a monocrop field of soybeans, you efficiently, at scale, manufacture it into soybean oil, you distribute it from a central location. There's an opportunity there for corporations to make more money compared to buying butter from your local farmer. It ends up being less expensive also because of agricultural subsidies recently. Within the past 50 years or so, USDA Farm Bill subsidizes soybeans and corn, which drives down the price of oils like soybean oil and corn oil. And then if you compare the cost of a business using just any olive oil compared to soybean oil, there's about a 5 to 10-fold price difference. Where we are now is really businesses are seeing the value in differentiating themselves, and consumers that are willing to potentially pay a few dollars more for a restaurant meal, or, in some cases in the packaged food, the premium quality packaged food is using a seed oil, so they don't actually have to increase their price. They just have to look at, will they gain customers or build trust and loyalty with customers for eliminating seed oils. So really it comes primarily down to cost.
I know a lot of minor mom and pops want to do that, but is there any major company that has said, okay, I will do that. I will go ahead and change the world, and I will, like a craft food kind of a company?
None of those large conglomerates yet. And I predict that what could happen is that, similar to how they do gluten-free, they might just have certain options that are seed oil-free if there's enough demand.
Do you have a list of people who actually are enrolled with your certification that people can go to a website and say, okay, here is a list that I can see, or an app that you've developed where people can download an app and say, okay, 5 restaurants around me that are seed oil free where I would want to eat?
So currently for restaurants, we have a wait list. Restaurants are actually harder to work with and certify. They have more ingredients, more employs more budget constraints. So we're primarily focused on packaged foods at the moment. We will have a product finder on our website in the near future. Currently, we've certified about 40 different companies with over 100 different products between them. Some of these products are already on the shelf with the seed oil free certified label on them, and consumers will be able to find that products bearing the seal in Whole Foods, Sprouts, Fresh Market, Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart, GNC, CVS, and
What's your website?
seedoilfreecertified.com.
Seedoilfreecertified.com. So tell me, what are the health issues that are linked to seed oils?
So the evidence is actually conflicting because of how research works. Not all studies are going to say the same thing. That's healthy, that's good. There are credible studies linking an omega-6 to omega-3 imbalance to increased risks or increased rates of death from cancer, heart disease, and all causes. When we look at seed oils specifically, there are several older but extremely well-designed randomized controlled trials. One of them is called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, which link high seed oil intakes with higher rates of death from all causes and heart disease, despite effectively lowering cholesterol. So this is a really important point. Many of the studies purporting health benefits from seed oils are looking at the cholesterol lowering properties. Seed oils do lower LDL, sometimes called bad cholesterol, but that's not a true health endpoint. That's a potential risk factor for cardiovascular disease. This randomized controlled trial, the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, that looked at the effects not only on cholesterol but actually on rates of death, found that while seed oils effectively lowered cholesterol, they increased rates of death from cardiovascular disease and other causes. And the other concerning part about that study was that it found that the participants who had the greatest cholesterol lowering effect had even higher rates of death.
Is it the inflammation?
The study wasn't able to say why this effect occurred. But it was a very well-designed study for saying we take two groups of people, thousands of people in each group. Some of them eat large amounts of seed oils, others don't, and here were the outcomes. So it's interesting because, that type of study, one of its strengths is that it's very good at measuring an effect, but it's not always good at determining the underlying mechanism or reason for that effect. But there are recent studies linking high seed oil or high omega-6 intake with headaches, chronic pain disorders, IBS and gut health problems, dysregulated sleep, pediatric asthma and allergy issues, and impaired early childhood development.
Wow, that's huge. And is there one particular thing? I'm big into Ayurveda and I am a huge advocate for detoxifying naturally. We promote oil pulling, tongue scraping, essential oils, all these things. And if somebody decides to remove seed oils from their diet altogether, how long before they can see one particular thing that they will say, okay, within 6 weeks, I was able to say my headaches went away? Do you have any success story that you can talk about or any?
Yeah, we're really fortunate. There actually is a great study that looked at headache sufferers who decreased their omega-6 intake. Some of the people in the study were also advised to increase their omega-3 intake. So that's essentially eating less seed oil and in some cases adding more wild-caught seafood with that. These were people that were having chronic headache issues in this group, and it was a 12-week study. It found that within about 4 to 6 weeks, they experienced a benefit. And over the course of the 12-week study, the people that ate lower amounts of seed oils or eliminated seed oils, and the people who did that along with eating more omega-3s did experience significantly fewer headaches. So, 4 to 12 weeks is a great target just to see anyone that isn't immediately convinced that they should eliminate seed oils forever, wants to just try it out and see what happens. I think 4 to 12 weeks is a great target. We could also talk, Dr. Puneet, a little bit about the physiology and what happens when you stop eating seed oils, how long they actually take to clear from the body and why.
Yeah, please.
Sure. So, when you eat fats, they are absorbed systemically in the form of free fatty acids that can be used for energy. They can also be incorporated into cell membranes. They can be stored in adipose or fatty tissue. And when people are eating large amounts of seed oils, the omega-6 fats are being used for all of the above. So in the bloodstream, just the circulating free fatty acids really only take minutes to hours to clear, but other locations where seed oils are essentially stored or incorporated into cells take more time. So the fatty acids in most cell membranes are replaced fairly quickly after just 1 to 2 cell divisions. That's typically 24 to 48 hours in many tissues. These cell divisions in this timeline is dependent on stopping eating the omega-6 fats, because if you're still eating them, of course, it'll continue to be incorporated into cells. There are also a form of stored fats in muscle tissue called triacylglycerols. This is like ready to access quick fuel for muscles. The turnover for that is about 29 hours. And then red blood cells are an exception to the cell division rate that I mentioned. It takes up to 4 months to replace the fatty acids that are stored in erythrocytes and erythrocyte cell membranes. The thing that some people get a little worried about is that it does take much longer to replace the fatty acids that are stored adipose tissue, meaning stored body fat, what we need for long-term fuel and a little bit of padding, and so that our face and our skin are nice and soft and have some structure below the skin. So it can take 2 to 4 years to get a full turnover of the stored omega-6 fats in adipose tissue. But as we saw with that headache study that I mentioned, which by the way is from a National Institutes of Health researcher named Dr. Christopher Ramsden, if anyone would like to look it up, we saw that people can experience relief in a much shorter time period. And that's because those omega-6 fats that are stored in adipose tissue are sequestered. It's a storage form for fatty acid. So while there is some evidence that the adipose tissue or stored body fat plays a role in other bodily processes, it's not the same thing as having circulating and stored omega-6 fats in other cell membranes. So I wouldn't stress out too much if someone wants to lower their omega-6 levels in their body. It'll happen fairly quickly, and then the final clearing out of adipose tissue to get back to kind of baseline levels will take more like 2 to 4 years. Some things that people can do to speed this up would be primarily exercise, even just walking. Exercise does 2 things when it comes to adipose tissue and fats in other places like muscles and cell membranes. One is that it increases the release of those fatty acids, which is called lipolysis. And then the other thing that happens is it, of course, allows you to burn fat at a higher rate, which is called fatty acid oxidation. So really just having, kind of like we would do for health anyway, a regular gentle exercise regimen is one of the best things that people can do. The other thing that can potentially work, which I don't think is absolutely necessary, is fasting in a way that works for the individual. There's a lot of different information and material out there about fasting. It's not for everyone. It's not safe for everyone. But for people who can safely fast in a way that works for them, what it does is it shifts your metabolism to more fatty acid oxidation. And of course, because you're not eating foods, you're able to burn more fat metabolically and replace cell membranes and potentially shed unwanted weight more easily as well.
Do you suggest intermittent fasting, or do you suggest like 72-hour, 48-hour fasts to get rid of this accumulated seed oil?
I think either one would work really well. I mean, based on evidence of how fasting works, I think that anyone who can do it safely and reasonably comfortably, there's a benefit there in terms of autophagy and mitophagy, replacing cells that are not functioning correctly anymore, and also these other things like increasing the turnover of omega-6 fats to be replaced with other fats in cell membranes. So really, the biggest guiding principle would just be that one method might work better for a certain individual, and then a different type of individual, the other method might work better.
So I personally did 72-hour fast once, and I felt that literally changed my whole life. I do intermittent fasting most days, not every single day, but most days. Weekends I could probably skip, but I feel such a huge difference the day I don't. The energy level is so much different. So oral health, gut health, and metabolic syndrome that people are facing because of seed oils.
Sure. So, I actually had never looked into oral health and seed oils. It was a really interesting question, so I prepared some notes. Quick summary is that there actually are studies linking a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio to higher rates of periodontal disease, which is like serious, tooth and gum disease that's also associated with other health problems. And the omega-6 intake, potentially independently of the omega-3 intake, may increase the inflammation that's associated with gum disease.
And what about the gut health?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. That's an area where there's a bit less conclusive. I had mentioned human studies that do link it with development of irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease, as well as severity. The mechanisms, though, we're going to have to look at some animal studies. So the thing is, it's really hard to take a biopsy of a human's stomach intestine just for science. So it's That's the kind of thing that animal studies are used for. And there are some animal studies suggesting that omega-6 fats from seed oils can alter the intestinal microbiome, which is typically, one of the factors that can contribute to certain disease states, particularly when we're thinking about gut health. The other thing too that's really interesting is we had just talked a little while ago about how omega-6 fats are incorporated into cell membranes. Now, these are very fluid liquid fats, and they actually increase the membrane permeability, meaning they allow cells to, compared to saturated fats like we were talking about with ghee and coconut oil, it results in a less stiff cell membrane. There's evidence that eating large amounts of seed oils may alter the function of the intestinal epithelium or gut lining. So these are potential mechanisms.
I've heard Dr. Eric Berg, Josh Axe, and Mark Hyman, even Stephen Gundry all talk about leaky gut connection with seed oils. Interesting. And what about the metabolic syndrome? Like, for example, a lot of people are getting diabetes, and fatty liver is becoming a huge issue, and insulin resistance is becoming a huge issue. Can you shed some light with seed oils? Because of that, we also keep hearing sugar is the enemy for everything. Can seed oils be similar culprit as sugar, or even bigger culprits when it comes to insulin resistance and weight gain?
There's not a metacoronary experiment that says here's the evidence with a direct link to obesity and metabolic syndrome. But similarly to what we were talking about with mechanisms, there is a human study that shows that eating a fairly large dose of omega-6 fats from seed oils increases the hunger hormone ghrelin. So it's possible that people eating large amounts of seed oils in processed foods and other sources are getting hungry, or so they're overeating. There is some evidence to link the intake of omega-6 fats with changes in endocannabinoid signaling. Now, when I say that, what I'm talking about is our body has natural receptors and signaling molecules that work similarly to cannabis. And a lot of people probably know that one effect of consuming or ingesting or smoking cannabis is the munchies. Similar type of thinking here, except it's taking place internally because of eating large amounts of omega-6 fats. So that also points to a potential link between obesity, appetite regulation, and seed oil intake. One area that's a bit more speculative is that there are many animals that go into hibernation. There are different signals that cause mammals to go into hibernation. One of them is the temperature, there's the length of days and the light cycle, but another one is the locally available foods that they can eat. When I think of mammals going into hibernation, I think of squirrels storing nuts in the fall, making a burrow that has a bunch of acorns in it. Now, when we think about nuts and seeds and we think about hibernation, in nature, there's a seasonal effect to which foods are available. And in some mammals, the omega-6 fats actually trigger a metabolic state called torpor. Torpor is increased appetite, reduced energy expenditure and movement, and getting ready to essentially get fat and sleep through the winter. So humans do share some of these metabolic pathways and genes with mammals that hibernate. Humans, of course, do not technically hibernate, but the shared kind of genetic heritage there may point to a torpor-like state that could be induced in people from eating a large amount of omega-6 fats. Now, you had mentioned sugar and ultra-processed foods. A lot of people have probably seen graphs that show prevalence of obesity and prevalence of seed oil and omega-6 intake, and it looks like they map pretty well onto each other. That's not proof by itself. It suggests a trend. People can potentially argue against that and say, well, it's partly how we measure obesity. It's a generational effect. But what's clear is that there are more people that are struggling with issues around being overweight or having obesity. Like, that's very clear. And people who defend seed oils frequently say, well, it's not about seed oils. It's about ultra-processed foods. It's about sugar and other ingredients that are in ultra-processed foods, but it's just not the seed oils. That's kind of the argument against this. What's really interesting is that based on evidence from the USDA Economic Research Service, it's a fact, by the way, that seed oils as we know them today really didn't exist before the 20th century. Decade over decade, intakes of seed oils and omega-6 fats rose, taking us to the current all-time high that I mentioned of about 20 to 30% of daily calories. So some people have looked at that and said, hey, there does appear to be a relationship here in time between seed oil intake and obesity. Now, that by itself doesn't prove that seed oils are the primary cause or a significant cause for that. But one of the defenses that people will present is they'll say, well, it's not the seed oils, it's the ultra-processed foods and everything in the ultra-processed foods other than the seed oils. The really interesting thing, when I looked into this claim, which you hear a lot, is that the obesity problem is not caused by seed oils, it's caused by ultra-processed foods. If you actually look at the 20th century intake in the US of added sugars and cereal grains and flours, it's relatively static, meaning that of these ingredients that are in ultra-processed foods, sure, we could look at sodium, we could look at preservatives, but of these calorie-contributing ingredients, when we're talking about ultra-processed foods, really what they are is they're cereal grains, flour, sugar, and seed oils. I mean, there's not much else to an ultra-processed food other than, flavoring additives and things like that. So it's fascinating because, I think that there is a potential association between seed oil intake and obesity, and every time I hear that argument that it's not the seed oils, it's the ultra-processed foods, I think about this graph that shows that actually the primary ingredients other than seed oils in ultra-processed foods have remained fairly static, in some cases gone up slightly and then gone back down for the duration of the 20th century.
So if you had to pick the worst enemy, a spoon of sugar versus a spoon of seed oil, which one is the one that you would
I'd go for the
first
I'd
avoid?
go for the sugar, in part because it's not incorporated into cell membranes in the same way as seed oils, and I would also say that it's adding more enjoyment to my life compared to a seed oil, which does nothing for me. It's just saving a company money. Absolutely.
But in the meanwhile, before we close today's discussion, which was very interesting, by the way, what do you think with the new administration, RFK Jr.? Do you think things are looking to change?
So yeah, it's going to be really tough. If RFK would like to ban seed oils, it would take years. The Republican Party traditionally is the pro-farm interest party. So there's a little bit of a conflict there between MAHA potentially banning seed oils and the kind of the states that rely heavily on soybean and corn production. But I do think there's a path there for RFK. I think it could start with evidence-based warning labels in some places. Going back to that restaurant situation that you mentioned, where restaurants are reusing seed oils that are high in polyunsaturated fats, slap a warning label on those restaurants similar to tobacco, let people make an informed choice. If you want to eat the restaurant food that's fried in seed oils that's high in polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, aldehydes, and polymers, it's individual choice, but you've been warned. I think that, potentially RFK could help disentangle some of these subsidies over the next few years. It's more of a USDA and Congress decision, but I think that RFK could use his influence at HHS to push for changes in agricultural subsidies away from driving the price of seed oils down and more in favor of nutrient-dense foods and potentially alternative oil choices. The biggest thing that he could do, though, would be funding better research into the health effects of seed oils, because we have all of these unanswered questions. And if we're looking at potentially banning seed oils, it would be best if we had clearer evidence on the real effects of how people are eating them today.
And can you name the companies that make a big difference?
Sure. So I definitely would recommend Good Ranchers seed oil-free, gluten-free chicken nuggets made with lab-tested avocado oil. TrueBar plant-based protein bars are really easy to find in places like Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart. Daily Crunch sprouted nut snacks. Everybody eating allergen-free snacks, crisps, and cookies. Artisan Tropic plantain and cassava chips. Grazely wild game chips are like an organ meat snack that anybody, I think, would enjoy, whether they typically like organ meats or not. We've certified a plant-based milk company called Pecana Milk, pistachio butter called Seed and Shell, and then there's Just Nosh collagen bars, and soon we'll be announcing seed oil-free certified lab-tested olive oil and avocado oil brands that consumers can buy, as well as household names in major retail categories.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And guys, we'll probably do a remake of this in about a year's time, discuss more in detail how RFK Jr. has impacted American health, with probably hoping he can navigate a better way to get the seed oils out of our lives, going back to ancient wisdom of ghee and butter and avocado oil. And which are the other great oils that you say?
So we allow non-seed oils, including avocado oil, olive oil that you mentioned, coconut oil, butter, ghee, and rendered animal fats. Another one is palm oil. There are many options now for sustainable certified palm oil. We don't do the sustainability certification, but we recommend that companies consider using palm oil as it's a non-seed oil that's less expensive than a lot of these other oils and fats.
And it has been demonized. And I was actually at a palm oil session in Malaysia. I met the vice president, and he just told me that how the major companies, the big companies, I don't want to name them, they are Fortune 500 companies, they literally demonized palm oil, and they actually made soybean oil and canola oil the big names, which is pretty bad. And mustard oil, which was huge in India at one point, was also demonized. The imports were stopped, and canola oil kind of was given its spot. And that story is pretty scintillating. Maybe we'll come to that in the next episode or something. Thank you guys for joining in.
Yeah, have me back on to talk about mustard oil and erucic acid. It's really fascinating, and I agree with everything that you said about.
If you have next 30 seconds, why don't you say that?
Sure. So the official FDA position is that erucic acid, a monounsaturated fat in mustard oil, is unsafe for human consumption. So you can't buy traditional mustard oil here in the U.S. because it says not for human consumption. People do buy it under that loophole, but the research is actually really uncertain as to whether erucic acid in mustard seed oil is harmful. Really, the entire premise of canola oil is that rape seeds are also normally high in erucic acid. So in the 1970s, 1980s, Canadian companies developed a low erucic acid rapeseed oil, also called canola oil or Canada oil. And really the success of canola oil has been predicated on the idea that erucic acid is harmful. It's really an interesting example of the uncertainty that we have around all of this, because in countries that consume relatively high amounts of mustard oil, like India, there's not strong evidence that it's harmful. But here in the US, there's this official position that makes it sound like it's really bad and it's terrible and it's going to cause fatty buildup in the heart and other like heart failure problems. It's just fascinating because it goes to show that there are so many issues that haven't been thoroughly examined, where here in the US, people are presenting these assumptions as conclusive.
I agree. Money makes the whole world spin around, because I have been eating mustard oil. My grandmom, everybody means it's. I know people who have eaten mustard oil for up to 95 years of age, no problem. Anyways, thank you so much, Corey. We'll come to that again. Thank you for your timing today.
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks.
Puneet.